start or tweak my business, I'll say. So the goals for this talk tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the regenerative business design model. We're going to answer questions like how much do you charge, on what do you base your pricing? And then I have some tips to share with you. Starhawk will then lead us in a meditation, and we'll have a few minutes for questions. So this is the regenerative design process, where we might start with a vision. We go on to explore, get a little bit of information, set some goals, and then we do our analyze and assess steps before we create a design, which we would then put into place and celebrate it. And then we're going to do this phase of evaluation, and then take a little rest and reflect before we do that all again. So if you've been studying permaculture, you know about the regenerative design process. And if you don't, I highly recommend that you learn more about that. We're going to pick out some very particular parts of the regenerative design process tonight to focus on, which mostly is focusing on the vision, the goals, the analyze and assess, the design for making a pricing plan, implement, which is how you launch your business, and we'll talk about why it's important to evaluate and re-evaluate. So that's what we're going to work on covering over the next little bit. I'm going to start out by sharing with you my current working definition of permaculture for anyone here who might be new to that word. I am currently defining permaculture as an interdisciplinary design approach that is based in and derived from the observation of indigenous practices of nature stewardship and natural ecological systems of relationships. This design approach strives to repair and recreate regenerative and reciprocal systems for meeting human needs, while also enhancing the quality of life for all beings. Not just the human animals, but the non-human animals, plants, insects, fungi, everything. And when we think about regenerative, this is perhaps an important term to unpack here. One way to think about regenerative, especially when we're thinking about designing, is that we might be intentionally focusing on systems thinking, so that we are creating these natural cycles of abundance, and these cycles are replenishing natural resources as well, along with all of the resources that humans bring to bear in the system. When we are practicing regenerative design, we try to make things better than we found them and give back more than we take. And this also includes the work of anti-racism and climate justice. Permaculture, as you may know, is based in these three ethics of earth care, people care, and resource share. So when we're designing a business, we can use these ethics and the permaculture principles and the permaculture design process to create our business. And reevaluate how we're handling business, how we're thinking of business from the sort of more mainstream perspective to looking at our business in a way where we're choosing our values based on what is sacred to each of us, and considering how our actions or decisions that we're making about our business impacts the whole system that is the earth, that is our community. So one tiny example of that is, if you're getting your business cards printed, do you use a local printer, or do you order them online and have them shipped in from overseas? Clearly, the local printer is more regenerative in terms of you're keeping somebody in your community employed, which creates benefits not only for that business, but also for you, because someday when you're in a hurry to get something printed, you're going to have a printer right down the street who you will have a relationship, who can help you out when you're in a pinch. So as we're thinking about regenerative business and regenerative business design, we can think about reevaluating how we're doing business so that we are living our values and bringing what is sacred to each of us into how we create our business. And since we're in particular tonight talking about pricing and regenerative pricing, we might want to also think about pricing and the flows of money as an entire system as well, and where the business money is coming in and going out. So when you're thinking about your business being regenerative, perhaps you want to make sure that you are generating enough income that you can also, for example, pay a voluntary land tax or pay reparations, donate to not-for-profits, support locally owned businesses, which are sometimes more expensive to support. So these are things that any business can do, and you might want to think about that as you're designing your business so that you can weave those costs into your business design. So remembering that regenerative business design, where we have this vision of what we're doing and why we're doing it, and moving into the goals setting phase of our business. If we're thinking particularly about pricing goals that we have, this is an example of what we might be thinking of. So if we're creating a business that's regenerative, we do need for it to be profitable so that it can stay in business and so that we can also take care of our own needs. So some goals that you might have for your business is to have a business that is at least break even financially, a business that generates enough money that you can build some working capital, which you can also call savings, that you can use to grow your business down the road, that you can use to get you through the off season. I'm expecting that many of the folks here are thinking about having a regenerative business that has to do with land management in some way, maybe permaculture design or consulting on how to manage the land to prevent wildfires, things like that. There's going to be some seasonality in your business, perhaps. And so you'll want to have some working capital, some money put aside for those slower times of year. And also thinking about the wild energy of those are the things that are unexpected. If we have some money put aside for that, when your computer breaks or your work truck breaks down, you have some money where you can deal with that wild energy. Another example of a goal that you might have for a regenerative business is to be able to offer discounted rates to some folks, whether you want to offer some sort of solidarity pricing or sliding scale. Maybe you want to be able to occasionally do pro bono work for free work for some folks. You'd want to build that into your business goals. Also, you might want to, you're going to need to pay yourself enough. And when I say enough that it takes care of all of your personal expenses. Also, maybe that you're saving something like 10% or more for your own future care. And that you are able to, say, pay a voluntary land tax and reparations, which should have an S on it there. So this is an example of some goals that you might set for your business when you're thinking about pricing. So as we move from the goal setting to the analyze and assess phase, where we ask what is and so what about pricing. This is going to be one of your guideposts. So if you're trying to figure out how to price your services or your product for your business, you want to ask the what is question by finding out what other business owners with a similar business are charging. And who you want to look into and do research on would be people in your, maybe people in your community who have a similar business. You might want to get an idea of, you know, the price that a single shingle shop charges, you know, the solo business owner. Maybe get an idea of what your large landscaping company charges. You might also do some research in other cities. And then you'll have to adjust that to kind of, you know, be based on your market. For example, where I live in the place that's now called Rochester, New York, I can charge a rate for my work that is, you know, well, as low as I want to go, but I can charge between $50 and $85 an hour for some of my work, and that is a good price in this area. Whereas if I were in New York City, it might be, I don't know because I haven't done the research, but it might be 3 or 4 times that much. Sometimes in big cities, services cost a lot more. So one of the ways that you're going to determine how much to charge for your services or your product is to find out what other people are charging. Call them up, look on their website, send them an email, and get an idea of what it is that they're charging. And then adjust for your market. Maybe you want to focus on providing services for folks who can't afford the most expensive service. And so then you might adjust your prices a little bit differently. Or if you got prices for a nearby city that tends to have higher incomes than your region, then you might want to you know, kind of take that price from the other city and adjust it down. So one of the guideposts for deciding how much to charge for your services or your product is to find out what other people are charging. Another guidepost is where you're at in your career. Are you brand new and just getting started, or somewhere in the middle, or maybe you've been doing this work for another company, you know, as an employee, and you're starting your own business now for a good long time. So you're, you know, more on the expert end of things. You might, if you were a beginner, you might charge less than somebody who has been doing the same work for a much longer period of time. I think that's generally, you know, a pretty usual practice. And I see that there's some questions coming in. I think maybe we'll just wait till we get to the question segment at the end, if that's all right, unless there's something that that I'm saying that's not really clear at this moment. So yes, so another guidepost for setting your pricing for your business is where you're at in terms of whether you're new or you've been doing this for a while. I will encourage you, though, even if you're a beginner, not to undervalue yourself, because it's a lot harder to raise prices significantly down the road if you start out way undervaluing what your services are worth. So even if you're a beginner, you know, find your confidence and do a good job and charge a wage that is fair to you. Another guidepost is a break-even analysis. And it sounds really complicated, And it might look a little complicated. I'm going to show you an example in just a minute. But I think it makes sense overall. You know this in your own household. You have to earn enough income to pay your bills. And if you only earn enough money to pay your bills and you don't have any money to save, then you are at break even. And that's the point that you want to find for your business. You want to find that break even point, which I'm going to talk about how to do that in just a minute. And of course, you don't want to just get by with your business when you're setting up your pricing, but knowing where your break even point is gives you a foundation for making decisions about pricing, along with giving you a foundation for knowing how you might need to adjust your pricing if circumstances change. So the break-even point is the intersection of several leverage points because you have some influence. You are deciding the price that you're setting for your product or service. So that is a leverage point. The sales volume would either be how many hours you're working in a day or a week or a month, however you're looking at that, or if you were selling, say, potted herbs that you have propagated or started from seed, sales volume would be the number of pots that you're selling. Then some other factors in figuring out the break-even analysis are your costs. And costs are or can be broken down into fixed costs and variable costs. And I think that again can be fairly intuitive. So a fixed cost is kind of one example would be like the rent on your house. So that does not change, but a variable cost might be something like your water or your electricity. You use more of it and you pay more, you use less of it and you pay less. So in business, some fixed costs are going to be things like rent, perhaps insurance, and then variable costs are going to fluctuate with the number of hours that you work or the sales volume that you have. And we'll look at the worksheet in just a minute. Another factor to take into consideration when you're figuring out your break-even analysis is your time limitation. There are only 24 hours in a day, and we can many times make more money, but we cannot make more time. So what is your limit in terms of the number of hours you can work in a day and be taking good care of yourself? So when you know what your hourly rate is and the number of hours that you can work, that will tell you what the maximum income is that you can make in a day or a week or a year. So for example, say if you are going to work 40 hours a week and you can charge $100 an hour, then your maximum income would be $4,000 for that week. So I'm just going to change over to show you the sheet that we use in the Regenerative Business Design course to figure out the break-even point. So this is a worksheet that I have made up that is fairly flexible. Just for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to just look at the service pricing analysis, but it looks pretty much the same if you're looking at product too. So for example here, if we're saying that you could, and remember this is monthly up here, and this is just an example. So in a month, you might work 40 hours, which would be about 10 hours a week, or maybe you're working 20 hours a week or 30 hours a week. And say you just want to start out and see what happens if you charge $60 an hour. And so with that, you would be making, in terms of income, between $2,400 and $7,200. So that's on the income side. And we can just leave that and see if this is going to work out. So some fixed expenses that you might have in your business are things like advertising. You might have some equipment that you have to buy and supplies, whether that's shovels for your landscape installation business or a computer for tracking your income. Insurance, you're probably going to want to have some kind of insurance. You might have a lawyer, an accountant, licenses, marketing, research, rent, internet, printing, utilities. And if you get your utilities on a budget plan where you are paying the same amount each month, that can sometimes be helpful. So those are some fixed expenses that you might have in a business. And again, businesses can vary, but those are some sort of generic ones. And in this example, we'll say that they total $1,420. And then we might have some variable expenses. These are expenses that would change by an increased volume in our business. So we might have a salary that we're paying to an employee who works alongside us. And so if they're getting paid $25 an hour, that would cost you $1,000 a month in this 10-hour-a-week example, whereas it would be $3,000 a month in the 80 hours a week example. I'm sorry, 80 hours a month example. Another example of a variable expense would be your banking service charge, because that's usually something like 3%. So 3% of $1,000 is less than 3% of $10,000. So that's how that's a variable expense. So as you work on your break-even analysis, you can do this on paper, you can do this in an Excel spreadsheet, and they're going to be different for each business. You just write them down and add them up and see what they total. So just in this example, the total of our expenses for a business that is 10 hours, let's see, sorry, lost track, 10 hours a week or 40 hours in a month. The total expenses are $2,492. So when we subtract that from the income, we're actually losing $92 a month. So that, and then we have taxes to pay after that. So what that would mean is we would either need to see if we could cut some expenses, or maybe we want to try working a few more hours, or we can also change our price and see what happens if we're charging, say, $75 in this example here. And just to look at this quickly, at the bottom, it's $75 an hour. You can see that whichever hourly amount that you're working over the month, they're all profitable numbers. So this is what I mean about leverage points for your break-even analysis. You can change the rate, you can change the number of hours. You might be able to lower your expenses by, say, for example, shopping around for insurance or shopping around for equipment that costs less, until you can find numbers that work for making sure that you're at least breaking even. I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint. Pardon me, I'm a little out of practice with doing online classes. It's been a little while here, so there we go. So when you're thinking about how much to charge for your business, you want to look at this break-even analysis. So we looked at what other people, maybe who could be called your competitors, what they're charging. That's one way. Another way is to look at the break-even analysis, and also to consider where you are at in your career. And so when you put that all together, you have to step out and take a look at the big picture and see if you have a regenerative business from the perspective of, is it financially viable? I have found that there is a pretty broad range of folks who are doing land-based work, whether it's permaculture designing, permaculture consulting. And I think that in my research, I have met people who charge as low as $35 an hour to people who are charging more in the $150 or $175 an hour range. And that range depends on the things that we were just talking about. If they're more experienced, they're charging more. If they're in a larger city, they might be charging more. And some of the folks who I've met, and some folks who are in my area, are charging somewhere between $35 to $75 an hour, and they work on more of a sliding scale. So I hope that's a little helpful to you in beginning to think of how you're going to set your price for your product or service that you have. You want it, when you have settled on a price, you want to just take a step back and make sure that that price is going to help you meet your goals. And if you're saying that, seeing from the sheet that we did that $60 an hour is just break even, well, then maybe you do need to charge $75 an hour so that you have some money for working capital, so that you're able to pay a voluntary land tax, so that you can make sure that you can offer some discounted rates or occasionally do some work for free if you would like to do that. So when you have determined your break-even point, you want to take a step back and then look at your goals again and review them to make your final determination about what your price is going to be. I have a couple other tips for helping you stay in the green zone. One of those tips is to be prepared to reevaluate your pricing at least once a year. Many people will raise their rates starting the beginning of the calendar year, and they will let their clients know anywhere from 1 to 3 months ahead of time. Some people choose to raise their rates for everyone, and some people choose to raise their rates only for new clients, and they'll keep existing clients at the previous rate. There's no one way to do that and no right answer, but those are some things to think about. And when you're first getting your business started, you might not even want to wait a full year before you reevaluate your pricing, just to see how you're doing and making sure that you are definitely in the green zone. Another tip that I wanted to give you, if you're in business for yourself, people are going to ask you how much you charge. And sometimes you might just give an answer that's a dollar amount. You might just say, well, I charge $75 an hour. And for some people, that will be great, and you can move into a conversation about arranging a site visit. For other people, that might really shut the conversation down. So I like to, when people are asking me how much I charge, I don't want to avoid the question. I definitely want to give them a straight up answer. But I like to schedule like a free 15-minute phone call where I can just ask them a few questions about their place. If I'm doing, and this is when I'm thinking about my permaculture design and consulting work that I do, With a 15-minute call, I can get a sense of where they live and get a few thoughts from them on what it is they're trying to accomplish. And then I can tell them about how I charge and how much I charge and how I handle my billing. And we've had a little bit of a rapport that we've established before we just get to that question about how much I charge. Also, you can answer the question of how much you charge by when you have, if you have a website, to describe your services very clearly, and then to have your rate after the service so that people see the value of what they're getting and then learn what their investment is with you. And notice I just shared my last bullet, which is to frame the conversation so they are talking about their investment in your services, their investment in their land, their investment in their property, framing it as an investment for them as opposed to a cost is a positive way to have that conversation that will help them be a little bit more amenable to paying you what you're worth. Another tip I wanted to offer in the context of this question about pricing for your regenerative business is to talk about quotes versus estimates. So a quote is where you're telling someone, this is the price, this is what I'm going to charge you for the work that you want me to do. And that can work out really well. It feels there's a lot of certainty for the client. There's certainty for you because you'll know how much you're going to get paid for this job. The downside is when the unexpected happens, then you are committed to charging that price. So for example, if you're going to do an installation of an herb garden for someone, and as you're digging, you find out that the place where you're putting in the herb garden has cement about 2 inches below the surface of the soil. You know, what are you going to do about that? And as you solve that problem, that might take more of your time, or there might be additional expenses involved. And if you've given somebody a quote, they could be a little grumpy about having to pay a different price. So that would be a really tricky situation that you'd want to handle carefully with integrity and a good conversation. But that's kind of the downside of quoting for your work. On the other hand, if you do an estimate, you're telling people, well, based on what I know right now, this is what I think it will cost. And this is more of how I like to work because it's more flexible. When people have a budget, especially if they have a tight budget or a limited budget, we build in check-in points. So let's do the consulting work and check in and see where we're at. Let's do the design work and see where we're at in terms of how much of the budget that's eaten up, you know, and then is there still enough money to go ahead and do the installation as well. So with an estimate, instead of a quote, an estimate is a little bit more flexible. And especially if you're new to business and you're learning how long things take, I want to encourage you to think about offering estimates with check-in points instead of quotes. Another tip that I have is to help make sure that you're having clear agreements. So you want to, when you're talking about your pricing, you want to say it for the folks who are who learn and take in information in an auditory way. Those conversations can bring a lot of clarity. And then if you also put it in writing, that helps those folks who are more visually oriented. So I like this idea of say it and show it. When you talk about pricing with a client, even if you have, say, that 15-minute phone call, follow up with an email where you reiterate what your pricing is, if you're charging by the hour or by the job. Also, I recommend that you let them know how often you're going to bill them. Are you going to ask them to pay you at the end of every day? Are you going to send them a bill once a week, once a month when the job is done? Put your billing practices into writing as well, as long as, and additionally, to include payment terms. So when you've sent them an invoice, are you expecting them to write you a check on the spot, to get it to you within a week, 30 days? You'll want to make sure that you have your payment terms in writing also. So make sure with your pricing that you say it and you show them in writing what that is. And then also you can always refer back to the written document or the email that you've sent. You might want to consider, if you are writing up an estimate, you could ask folks to sign that. Again, just make sure that you're able to live up to what you're saying that you're going to do. So when we take these pieces of putting together using the regenerative design process, where we have a vision, then we set goals for our business, including our pricing goals. That I want a business that's going to pay me enough money so that I can keep the business going in a healthy way and also take care of my personal expenses while I put some money aside for my own future care. And then we do the analyze and assess of figuring out what it is that we're going to charge our customers by the hour or for a product that we're selling. And then we go on to launch that business, and remember to do that annual evaluation, the reevaluation of the pricing. When we create our business and we look at it from this point of view, we are bringing in the ethics and principles of permaculture so that we're recreating business to be really earth-centered, and creating businesses that are regenerative, not only because they can continue to stay in business because they are profitable, but also where they're fairly priced so that the people who need these services can afford them, while we're also caring for the earth. What I've been talking about tonight is just a little snippet of what I teach during the 8-week online regenerative business design course that I offer through the Earth Activists online community. And we have the 8-week session starting up in a few weeks on October 2nd. And so there are still spaces for people to register for the course. And we have a special offer that for anyone who is on the call tonight, that you will be receiving in the chat window. There will be the code that you use to get your 20% discount when you register for the course. In the Regenerative Business Design course, we cover things, not only pricing, we go even into more depth in terms of the financials so that you have a budget. We also look at things like marketing. And with the Regenerative Business Design course, if you do all of the exercises for the course and fully participate in the course, not only do you get the certificate of completion, but you'll also have a written business plan that can serve as your guide for your business, or if you're talking to anyone about borrowing money, or you're working with a small business development corporation to get your business started, you'll have this written business plan that will serve you as you launch your business and get going. If you're someone who already has a business going and you're looking for some support, we have a group called the Maven Makers, where once a month the Maven Makers get together as a group. We limit the group to 6 people in each Maven Makers group so that everybody gets time during that group meeting to share and exchange information about their business. And then besides that 60-minute meeting that we have as a group, we also I meet with each Maven for a 60-minute session once during the month, where we can talk about anything that you need to help your business get moved along, to get over a hurdle, to get started, whatever it is that you need. So that's a related program that we have that grew out of the Regenerative Business Design course. And one more thing to tell you about the Maven Makers is that the value is $375, and the investment is $157 a month for that program. So before we have the meditation with Starhawk and then move into questions, I just wanted to go back to the goals that I set for this presentation, which was to introduce the regenerative business design model. That's the steps that we go through to design our business. And then using that design process to answer how much do you charge and what are the things that you base your pricing on. Not only what your competitors are charging and where you're at in your career, but also your break-even point is going to influence your pricing. And then we talked about the tips where you're staying in the green zone by reevaluating every year. We talked about quotes versus estimates and how much do you charge, and how to have that conversation with prospective customers for your business. So we are at the point where the next thing we're going to do is a little meditation.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Starhawk.
I'm Starhawk. And this is a little meditation I developed actually after a conversation with a friend of mine who does business consulting. And he was saying that he thought running a successful business was like breath. You know, you need enough of it to keep you going, but you can't hold on to it infinitely. And I really liked that idea. So I invite you to get in a space that's comfortable and where you can breathe freely. You can close your eyes if you want to, or you can look at the beautiful spider web that Patty's put up. And just take some deep breaths in and out. As you breathe in, I'd like you to think just for a moment about what are your sources of abundance right now in your life? What are the ways you are taking in nourishment, the things that sustain you, that regenerate you, whether that's money, which might be part of it, generally is part of it, but also things like fun and relationships and time in nature and time to relax and good food and all of those wonderful things that we think money can buy, but so many of them are just things that are there and available for us. Just take a deep breath in and imagine all of those sources flowing in like rivers. And as you take a deep breath in, you can probably hear the sirens here at my house. You know, I think that's symbolic in some ways of the sense of alarm we sometimes feel about, can we get enough? Are we getting enough? So I'd like you to breathe in and just deeply, deeply fill your lungs and experience that feeling of, yes, I have enough. And then release that breath. And this time, take a deep breath in. As you breathe in, I'd like you to hold your breath. Hold it as long as you can without letting it go. And try to take in more. And ask yourself, how does it feel when maybe I'm taking in too much or holding on to it too long, not letting stuff go, not letting it flow? It's a different kind of anxiety. It's a different kind of loss. And then release that. And let yourself feel that relief that can come with letting go. And just breathe in and out for a moment and allow yourself to reflect on what you're taking in, what you're holding on to, what you might feel overwhelmed by and need to let go of. And taking a breath in now, I'd like you to breathe out as hard as you can, as far as you can. And as you do, reflect a little bit on what you're giving out to the world, what you're sharing with the world. And as you breathe out, when you feel like your lungs are empty, try to push out a little bit more air. Notice what happens. How does that feel? Is there another type of panic around giving out and giving out and giving out too much, being depleted? Then let that go. Take in. Notice how good it feels to take in and replenish and regenerate. And just take a moment and breathe in and allow yourself to feel that good feeling of taking in, being nourished, being replenished, taking in enough. And when you feel full, letting it out, giving it back, feeling that good feeling of having enough to give, giving freely, creating something, giving something back to the world. And when you start to feel that sense of emptiness, taking in again, as you breathe in and out and reflecting on abundance, replenishment, regeneration, nourishment that you can give and that you can receive. Find that place of balance. Notice how that feels. And remind yourself that just as air is always around us, we don't run out of it. They haven't figured out how to charge us for it yet. It's always available to us to replenish and to give back. And allow yourself to believe, know that you can believe, that you can have that ease and that abundance, that flow in your life, in your business, in your relationships. Replenishing, filling up, taking in what you need, releasing, letting go, giving back, and coming to that point of perfect balance. And take in one last breath with gratitude to the green things that make our oxygen. Give it back as a conscious gift to that green world. And then you can open your eyes and come back. And blessed be.
Thank you so much, Starhawk. That was really beautiful. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And
I really appreciate all the business guidance and wisdom I've gotten from you over the years. And I see lots of interesting questions, and I might have a few myself. So I'm going to stop talking and let you get to answering them.
Thank you so much. That feeling that maybe you experienced during the meditation when you were in the right balance of breathing in and breathing out, of filling yourself, filling your well with abundance, the well of your lungs with abundance, and then giving it back out to the earth. I think that when you have set a price for your services or your product, and you have that good feeling as you think about it and you look at how that's going to fit in and work to your business, I think that is another key of what you're looking for as you explore the question about pricing. So we're going to move back into questions, and I'm looking in the chat window. I see the first question is, what is a good approach to contacting people who may see you as a competitor? They may want to see a location to give pricing. You're right. So you have to decide when you're calling to or looking on, if you're looking on the internet, or Facebook, or social media to get pricing information, you don't have that perhaps uncomfortable conversation. If you're calling someone who might see you as a competitor, you have to decide how you're going to approach that ahead of time. You might not, want to call and say, hey, I'm starting a business just like yours down the road. I want to know what you charge for an hour. More likely you're going to call and say that you're interested in getting some information about their pricing, and you to be in integrity may not say a whole lot more than that to find out. So you might need to find out in that way, in a very generic kind of way. If they want to see a location to give pricing, they might want to do that. But probably you can pose your question or reframe a question in a way to get some idea of their pricing. Whereas you could say, well, let's just imagine I have your typical urban yard that's about 1/10 of an acre. Can you just give me kind of a ballpark? I'm not going to hold you to it, but can you give me a ballpark of what that might cost for you to come out and do a design for me? So I think those are some ways where you can get information from somebody who's already in a similar business about their pricing. I'm going to look down to your questions. So here is a comment. The break-even analysis assumes I can control the number of clients I'm able to get for landscape design. I am not able to accurately predict how many clients will contact me. Yeah, you're right about that. So part of what you're going to have to do for your business is to build up that client base. So when you're thinking about your pricing and doing your budgeting, you'll also want to have a clear understanding of how much time you have to make your business be profitable. Do you need to start this business on the side while you also have a job that brings in income? Do you need to make sure that you have a good advertising budget to get the word out? Do you need to work, in a related business, maybe you work in a nursery while you're building your client base for your landscape design? So you're right in that you cannot control the number of clients that you have, but there are limits to how many hours that you can work. And so the break-even analysis is really meant as a tool in that way to look at hours and hourly rate and how that is going to impact your bottom line for your business. I hope that's helpful. Another question that I'm seeing is, in the context of regenerative businesses, what's the most effective pricing approach? A set rate for design and consulting, transitioning to hourly for ongoing work, or a consistent hourly rate throughout? What key factors should we consider when deciding on our pricing strategy for maximum sustainability and impact? So in terms of the first question, what I like to do for my permaculture consulting and design work is that I have a 2-hour, what I call usually call it a walk and talk, 2-hour walk and talk. So that gives me enough time. I have them fill out an intake form ahead of time. And then during the 2 hours, I'll answer any questions that they want, and they can record it if they want to. And I have that at a price that is that covers my 2 hours. So plus a little bit of drive time. If I have a client who is a lot farther out, I might talk to them about also covering mileage or drive time at a reduced rate. But so I like the idea of starting out with sort of like a 2-hour minimum, and that is a set price. And then when I do design work, when I do additional site visits, if I'm doing plant shopping, any of that stuff, I do that at an hourly rate. That's how I like to do it. In terms of the key factors for deciding on your pricing strategy for sustainability, I think the answers are there in what I said earlier about the break-even analysis and what is kind of acceptable as a price range in the market that you're working in. Let's see. Thank you, Charles, for putting that in. Charles put in the link and the discount code. Here's another question I see. I'm not in the field of food justice at all, but I really like the values and ethos of this type of business design. Is this model applicable to every business? Yes, it can be. If that is something that's important to you, no matter what business you're in, you can build in ways that you can give back to your community, that you can support folks who are marginalized, that you can make reparations or pay voluntary land tax. So yes, that can be built into every business. And in the regenerative business design class, we talk about the different layers of regeneration that you can bring into your business in addition to including the social justice. I'm just looking through for more questions. Great. I'm just wondering if, I think I got through all of the questions that are in the inbox. I'm wondering if there are any more questions that you might want to submit in the inbox, or you could also unmute yourself. We can try that and see how that works out.
I have one, Patty. I've found that when I offer workshops and things, there's like, I often do best when I actually don't set a price. When I say, this is a pay what you can class. And because of that, so many more people sign up that I end up probably making more money than I would if I set a price. But it's kind of like the question of how do you know, like there's this sort of trade-off that the higher you price things, the fewer people you get. And yet, if you price things too low, you're banking on getting a lot of people. If you don't get a lot of people, then you're sort of stuck doing something for very low reward as far as money goes.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, how do you know? And I think one of the answers is trial and error, right? Because you've done it a couple of different ways where you set a price. You probably also done it where you had a price range, like a sliding scale. And then you've also had the sort of free will pricing. And for some of the classes that you're doing, that's worked out really well. So I think one of the ways that you know is to try, experiment a little bit. And you want to do that in ways that aren't going to hurt you. So if you are playing around with pricing and you're doing, say, a consultation, or maybe you're teaching a class and you're experimenting with the pricing, you might want to make sure that that's only like an hour event or not more than a 2-hour consult. You wouldn't want to, for example, have a project that you're going to be spending 50 hours on and find that, oh goodness, you know, that it wasn't priced correctly, or a class that's a PDC, and you know, so that has all those 72 hours or more in it. That's one thing that that I think of in what you're talking about. The other is that I think certain products or services might lend themselves better to that free will pricing than others. So some of the events that you have can work well that way. If some of these students are starting a business and they're teaching courses, they might be able to do that sort of free will pricing. Other businesses that might work that well, sometimes I've heard of there being some restaurants that are doing that same thing for pricing. You pay what you can. And that model inspires people to be as generous as they can be if they're living in abundance. And then also, of course, allows people who are going through a little bit tougher time to pay less. I have one more thought about that, which is, isn't necessarily to do with this pricing class, but comes up with the question that you were asking, Starhawk. And that is that how we price things creates a value of a perception of value. How we price things creates a perception of value. So things that are free, people often don't value. And you know, we see that sometimes when we do have things that are free, but we're not asking for a donation, and maybe 100 people sign up and 5 show up or something. But also some people, and this isn't true for everyone, but some people are really into exclusivity. So they'll be really happy to pay more for something because they think they're getting something better than the thing that's less expensive. So that comes along with knowing who your customer is too, and knowing if your customer is going to be somebody who has the means and wants to pay a lot of money or not.
Well, my customers tend to be political activists who are suspicious of money altogether and resentful of having to pay anything. So.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the question of
marketing something a little different to get the, you know, like the designer brand type people.
That's right.
Pay $5,000 for a designer handbag or whatever.
Well, maybe if you offered them $5,000 for an exclusive, you know, dinner with Starhawk, you could probably find somebody who would want to, who would like that exclusive experience. I see that there is a question. Janaki?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I have had some, I was the one who asked the question about number of clients, because I have been doing what you said about having other jobs. And when I worked full time, I didn't have really any extra time to do design work. But I left my job and I have more time, but not really much money. So went through a whole lot of savings. And but I did figure out one way that I was able to get clients this year, which is I collaborated with a course, a workshop that I taught, and by being part of there's a couple of nonprofits that were involved that were doing marketing for the course. I was able to reach a much wider audience. It seems like a really good audience for me. And then I got multiple calls in that 1 week. And one suggestion, because one part of, I think the class that I taught was not always completely successful. I'm not skilled yet as a teacher, but there was one part of it that went really well, where I was basically doing garden coaching with just people speaking what their landscape problems were. And I just because of my experience with long-term experience, I was able to just give them ideas right off the top of my head, like I would be walking through their landscape. I'd be able to describe something that they should do without ever having to go to their property. And one of my neighbors suggested that might be a model of a way to create income that would be ongoing, if it would be as a kind of a garden coaching session or clinic that would run month to month, say. So if people would get together online every month, and they'd be part of a club almost, where they would be hearing about what other people were doing, be part of a community. And I thought that was a really brilliant concept. I'm wondering if anyone else has been doing that, and if there is any clue how one would price that.
So I'm going to answer that from a couple of points of view. One is we've done a similar structure with the Maven Makers group, which is the group and individual coaching group that I lead here in the Earth Activists online community. In that, when I determined the pricing for that, so my usual rate for business coaching is $150 an hour. And when I work in the Earth Activist community, I know that there are a lot of people doing good work and who may not be able to afford that. So I usually, and it's a not-for-profit, the organization is a not-for-profit. So I usually half that rate and charge $75 an hour for coaching. So what I did is I figured out how much time I would be investing if I had 6 people in the Maven Makers, with the 90 minutes for the group once a month, and then each individual person. And so this rate of $157 a month made it be so that I was getting at or close to that $75 an hour rate. Because people, more than one person, is paying for that 90 minutes of time, right? So it saves everybody some money, which is what you're talking about with doing the group coaching for gardens. And in terms of if I know other people who've done that, yes, sometimes that is how we actually teach permaculture classes, or if somebody has a design project that they want done, but they can't fund it, we can turn it into a workshop. So, come and learn how we do the goal setting, come and learn how we do the site assessment and analysis, come and learn how we do the design. And so then the students come and they're paying for a class, and the project that you're working on in the class is the design for that site. So that's one example of other people doing that. Another, Lisa DiPiano, who is a permaculture teacher in Massachusetts, she used to have something called the Mobile Design Lab, and it's kind of similar, where I don't know all of the details, but basically she would go into neighborhoods and have people bring their questions, and she would guide folks into doing a design for their particular property by bringing her services to different neighborhoods at different times. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, those are great ideas. I'm not clear on how you price with the Maven Makers, because I heard you say 175. Is that what each individual pays for each 90-minute session?
No, each person is paying $157 a month, and that includes both the 90-minute session that we do as a group and their 60-minute session that is each individual person.
Oh, I see.
So
okay.
they're getting $375 worth of coaching at the rate of $157 a month.
Oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, thank you. That's helpful.
You're welcome. We're a little bit past the hour that we had set aside for tonight, so I'll just see if there are any last questions before we wrap this up for tonight. Well, again, thank you for taking your time to be here, for helping me get back in the practice of some online teaching, which I haven't done over the summer. And I hope to see some of you in the Regenerative Business Design course that we have coming up, or feel free to contact me in the Earth Activists Online Network if you have any more questions about either the course or about the Maven Makers group. And again, my thank you to Starhawk for that fabulous meditation, and to Charles for helping with tech support, and Mariah and Elizabeth for all of your help. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a great night.